$32 billion. Sam Bankman-Fried was worth on paper on November 1, 2022. He was 30 years old. He wore a crumpled t-shirt to Senate hearings. He slept on a beanbag in the office. He was called the next Warren Buffett. Time magazine called him the next JP Morgan. Elon Musk considered him for a Twitter acquisition. And in a single 10-day window in November 2022, every single dollar, every empire, every promise collapsed into nothing. Not slowly, not quietly, like a skyscraper being imploded from the inside. What you're about to watch is not a story of bad luck. It's not a market downturn. It is a precise, documented timeline of how one man and a small circle of insiders allegedly stole billions from ordinary people and nearly took the entire crypto market with them. This is Atlas Untold, and this is the complete 10-day collapse of FTX. Who is Sam Bankman-Fried? To understand the fall, you have to understand the rise. Samuel Bankman-Fried, known simply as SBF, grew up in Stanford, California, the son of 2 law professors. He studied physics at MIT, and by most accounts was extraordinarily intelligent. But what set him apart wasn't his IQ, it was his philosophy. SBF was a devoted follower of a movement called effective altruism, the idea that you should earn as much money as possible, then give it all away. He genuinely believed, or at least preached, that he was going to save the world with his billions. He interned at a trading firm called Jane Street Capital after college, where he learned the art of high-frequency arbitrage trading. He was good, extremely good. In 2017, he spotted something the rest of the financial world had missed. Bitcoin was trading at different prices in different countries. In Japan, it was selling for up to 15% more than in the United States. So SBF set up a small team, exploited that gap, and reportedly made millions in a matter of months. He called it the kimchi premium trade. That was just the beginning. In 2019, he founded FTX, a cryptocurrency derivatives exchange. The pitch was simple: smarter tools, lower fees, institutional-grade infrastructure. Within 3 years, FTX had over 1 million users, was processing billions in daily volume, and was valued at $32 billion. Major investors, including Sequoia Capital and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Fund, had poured hundreds of millions in. Sports arenas carried the FTX logo. Tom Brady was a brand ambassador. The Miami Heat played in the FTX arena. It looked unshakable, felt inevitable, until it wasn't. But here's where history gets dark. And here's what most people covering this story miss. Before FTX, SBF had founded a separate company called Alameda Research, a crypto trading firm. On paper, the two companies were completely independent. In reality, they were anything but. Alameda Research was run by Caroline Ellison, a former Jane Street colleague of SBF's and, as it would later emerge, his on-again off-again girlfriend. Alameda was supposed to be a standalone trading firm, separate accounts, separate risk. But according to prosecutors, what was actually happening behind closed doors was staggering. FTX customer funds, real money deposited by real traders around the world, were being quietly funneled into Alameda Research. Not as loans, not as disclosed investments, just moved, used to make bets, used to cover Alameda's losses, used allegedly as a personal slush fund. The critical link between them was a token that FTX had created called FTT. Think of it as FTX's own internal currency. Alameda held enormous quantities of FTT, and the value of FTT was propped up entirely by FTX's continued success. If FTX fell, FTT became worthless. And if FTT became worthless, Alameda's entire balance sheet collapsed. Like a house of cards, built on a foundation of sand, stacked on the edge of a cliff. All it needed was one gust of wind. November 2nd, 2022. Day 1. A journalist at a crypto news site called CoinDesk published a report that, in hindsight, pulled the pin on a grenade. The article revealed a leaked portion of Alameda Research's balance sheet, and what it showed was alarming. Of Alameda's roughly $14.6 billion in assets, a staggering $5.8 billion, nearly 40%, was held in FTT tokens. Tokens that FTX itself had created. Tokens that FTX controlled. In simple terms, Alameda's net worth was almost entirely based on something that its sister company had printed out of thin air. For a few days, the reaction was muted. The crypto world noticed. Analysts raised eyebrows. But nothing exploded yet. SBF issued statements calling it misleading. Ellison responded on Twitter, claiming the balance sheet shown was just one of several Alameda portfolios. The denial was confident, almost too confident. Then came the move that changed everything on November 6, Day 5. Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, the founder and CEO of Binance, FTX's biggest rival, posted a single tweet. He announced that Binance would be liquidating its entire position in FTT tokens, roughly $580 million worth. His stated reason was recent revelations about mishandled funds. Some called it responsible risk management. Others called it a calculated kill shot. Either way, the effect was instantaneous. The crypto market froze in horror. What happened next was the fastest bank run in financial history. Within hours of CZ's tweet, FTX users began withdrawing their funds. Not slowly, not in trickles. In a single 72-hour window, users tried to pull out over $6 billion from the platform. To put that in perspective, that is more than most traditional banks process in withdrawal requests in an entire year. FTX's systems buckled. Withdrawals slowed, then stalled, then stopped entirely. November 8th, Day 7. FTX officially halted all customer withdrawals. The announcement came quietly, a notice buried in the platform's interface. But the message was deafening. Your money is gone. Or at least, we don't have it right now. On social media, FTX customers posted screenshots showing balances they couldn't touch. A retired teacher in Ohio who had invested her savings. A young engineer in Nigeria who had used FTX to avoid a collapsing local currency. A small business owner in Singapore who thought crypto was the safest way to hold value. All of them locked out. All of them watching their funds sit behind a screen they couldn't access. In a desperate last play, SBF reached out to CZ directly. He asked Binance to acquire FTX, essentially to absorb the dying exchange and save the customers. CZ agreed to a non-binding. In total, the estimated shortfall, the gap between what FTX owed customers and what it actually had, exceeded $8 billion. $8,000 million. Vanished. SBF didn't disappear. He gave interviews. He tweeted. He seemed almost baffled by the reaction to what had happened, as if the collapse of an $8 billion hole in customer funds was simply a math error to be corrected. In December 2022, U.S. authorities charged Sam Bankman-Fried with wire fraud, securities fraud, and campaign finance violations, among other counts. He was arrested in the Bahamas and extradited to the United States. His parents, both Stanford law professors, posted part of his $250 million bail bond, using their home as collateral. He was placed under house arrest at their Palo Alto home, continuing to give media interviews while awaiting trial. His co-conspirators, including Caroline Ellison and FTX co-founder Gary Wang, had already flipped. They cooperated with prosecutors and agreed to testify against him. Ellison, in particular, gave devastating testimony, describing in detail how SBF had directed her to use customer funds to repay Alameda's debts, to manipulate crypto markets, and to deceive investors. The trial began in October 2023. It lasted 4 weeks. On November 2, 2023, exactly 1 year after the CoinDesk article had detonated the bomb, the jury returned after just 4 hours of deliberation. Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty on all 7 counts. In March 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Here's the part that history always teaches us, and that we always seem to forget. FTX was not uniquely evil. It was uniquely familiar. The same playbook had been run before. Enron created fake subsidiaries to hide debt. FTX created fake token valuations. Madoff ran a Ponzi scheme on wealthy investors. FTX ran a liquidity scheme on retail traders. Lehman Brothers leveraged itself to extinction. FTX leveraged customer funds without their knowledge or consent. Every single time, the warning signs were there. Every single time, the charisma of the founder and the promise of extraordinary returns silenced the skeptics. There is a financial principle, old, unglamorous, and persistently ignored, that says, if you cannot explain how a system generates consistent, outsized returns in simple terms, you probably shouldn't trust it with your money. FTX couldn't explain it. Sam Bankman-Fried deflected with philosophy and complexity and goodwill, and billions were handed over anyway. The victims of FTX were not naive. They were engineers and teachers and entrepreneurs. They were people who did their research, who read the articles, who saw Tom Brady's endorsements and Sequoia Capital's backing and thought, this is legitimate. That's the cruelest part of financial fraud at scale. It always targets the people trying hardest to build a better future. As of early 2024, FTX's bankruptcy estate, now managed by restructuring professionals, had recovered enough funds to repay creditors at or near 100 cents on the dollar for most claims. A remarkable outcome, given the devastation. But the years of locked funds, the market chaos, the lives disrupted, no court can repay that. 10 days, $32 billion down to zero. A 1,000-year sentence of prison time now shared among the inner circle. And millions of ordinary people left asking, how did nobody stop this? That question, how did nobody stop this, is the question Atlas Untold exists to answer. Because throughout history, from the tulip mania of 1637 to the South Sea bubble, from Enron to Madoff to FTX, the answer is almost always the same. People stopped asking questions when the numbers looked good. If this video helped you understand what really happened, share it with someone who still thinks crypto is magic money. Subscribe to Atlas Untold for more stories where history and finance collide. And drop a comment below. Who do you think is the most dangerous financial fraudster in history? We'll see you in the next one.